Joining us now, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. And Tom, I'm deeply suspicious of this move by Boasberg, who's an Obama appointee. Are you suspicious that this case, now being postponed until after Inauguration Day, will fall victim to political influence?
I don't think Judge Boasberg should be on the case. In my view, he's a victim of the crimes that we're talking about, his court. I don't understand why he hasn't given it to another judge not on the FISA court. Secondly,
perhaps because he wants to influence it unduly.
Well, that's one of the reasons we have recusal requirements for the court. So the fair administration of justice is held up as opposed to undermined. Secondly, though, Carter Page, he was never talked to, it looks like, in terms of having a chance to go before the court with a victim impact statement. So those are the issues that this court's going to have to handle. I doubt a Biden Justice Department, if it ever occurs, is going to get in the way of this case. It doesn't need to get in the way of the case because Kleinsmith has been treated with kid gloves largely, and those around him have been treated with kid gloves to date.
Yeah. Well, Boasberg should be incensed that the FISA court over which he presides was lied to by the FBI and the Department of Justice in the Obama administration and thereafter. Let me turn now to this lawsuit, which would give exclusive authority to Mike Pence on which electoral votes to count. I got to tell you, in all honesty, as a lawyer, and I've followed these election cases, I see this going nowhere fast.
Well, the courts are afraid to take these cases on, not because they're not substantial, it's because they're just afraid for political purposes, and they don't want to get involved, which is what their job is. But because it's President Trump, there's a new standard for the rule of law here. And what Louis Gohmert's case highlights is that we don't know how it will work out if there are challenges in the Senate and the House when they count the Electoral College votes on January 6th. Everyone who's telling you this is how it will work and this is how it should work is blowing smoke in your ear. Right. In my view, these challenges are substantial, and that Congress has an obligation not to be a rubber stamp and not to be complicit in these compromised elections. And I don't understand why any senator would want to endorse and ratify what went on in these various battleground states. And kudos to Mo Brooks for coming forward. We need one senator to come forward. And Vice President Pence, and this is the heart of the Gohmert lawsuit, despite what everyone says, has significant power to figure out how the two bodies will proceed in figuring out who actually won the election as opposed to what we're being told to now.
Well, we'll wait and see what happens with the lawsuit. I'm not optimistic that Gohmert will get his way. Let me ask you about, in order on January 6th, Republicans in the House want to challenge the Electoral College count, but they need a U.S. senator to be on board. So far, none have stepped forward. The new senator, Tommy Tuberville, has sort of suggested he might be willing, but Mitch McConnell will never allow that to happen, will he?
I mean, he may not want it to happen, but all the senators are independent and they're answerable to the American people and their state voters.
Who told you that?
Well, some of them do act independently, and I think there's going to be enormous pressure on senators to come forward and uphold the rule of law and try to figure out what went on in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and such. This is a simple issue. For all the noise you hear, it's a simple issue. They changed the rules in several states and counted votes they shouldn't have been counting. And those votes that were counted improperly are the reason Biden got those electoral college electors in those various states. If they followed the rules, those electors wouldn't be going for Biden, and the president would get a second term. Congress doesn't want to grapple with that simple point because they're afraid of the political blowback. The Constitution be danged. And my view is the rule of law needs to be upheld, whether or not you want President Trump to be have a second term. It's the question is the Constitution going to prevail, or are we going to have elections ruined by illicit activity at the state level. It's not a suicide pact, this Electoral College. Congress has the final say for a reason, to prevent this fraud from ruining our elections.
You say fraud, though, but for example, in Wisconsin, they did a hand recount, and it only added, I think, 87 votes to Joe Biden. They did a recount by hand in Georgia. It didn't change the outcome, and there was no real evidence of fraud uncovered there, at least to the satisfaction of any judge. The Texas lawsuit before the Supreme Court was a non-starter. They didn't take it. The latest challenge involving Pennsylvania to the Supreme Court, that's not going to happen before Inauguration Day. So, I mean, it's true, is it not, that at least the argument of fraud hasn't sustained a legal standard in a court of law?
When you count votes you're not allowed to count, that's fraud. Those votes were counted illegally under state law and the Constitution. That's fraud. It doesn't mean the vote was for Biden and it was cast for Trump or vice versa. It means they took a group of ballots they weren't allowed to touch, weren't allowed to count, and count them. That's election fraud. That's a simple issue. We don't have to prove anyone's ballot was mishandled, was purposely fraudulent. It was they broke the rules. They counted ballots that they weren't allowed to count. Any more than counting ballots to come in 4 weeks after the election is appropriate, is counting ballots that weren't allowed to count under state law appropriate. That's the issue here. It's a major fraud beyond even the instances of fraud that you're talking about, Greg.
Well, I would call it, for example, in Pennsylvania, extra legal, because what the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania did, counting late ballots 4 days after the election, received late, was in clear contravention of the stated law passed by the legislature in Pennsylvania. Supreme Court should have taken up that case. I agree with you on that. Tom Fitton. Tom, thanks very much.